Okay, great. So again, welcome to everyone who's joining us this morning. We're very excited to be presenting today's information, navigating the City of Markham zoning and building permit processes. Economic development and the building department have been working together and looking forward to this opportunity to share expertise and also to clarify the processes and who you should contact when you are approaching the City of Markham with the building permit application. And so today's session will start with Daniel and Kristen presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A session afterwards. You're welcome to submit your questions via chat during the presentation or to hold off till the end of the presentation to ask your questions. And then we'll close around 10:25 this morning. So again, welcome to the City of Markham's Navigating the Zoning and Building Process. Markham is a fast-growing city, and we're blessed to have the diverse community that we do and the thriving business community that we do, with headquarters of companies like IBM, AMD, GM, Honda, Aviva, and many others. And whether you're small, medium, or large business, if you're looking to relocate, start a company, or expand, the Economic Development Department is here to assist you. And the City of Markham has a very business-friendly mandate. We all work together across the Commission of Development Services and across the city to help companies expand in the city. So we're very pleased to be offering this presentation today. And I see through the chat that somebody's asking about receiving the presentation. Absolutely. So our plan is after this presentation, at some point today, you'll receive a follow-up email with a copy of the PDF of the presentation, as well as a link to view the webinar at your own leisure and opportunity. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to our folks in building standards. And you know, the Building Standards Department is responsible for all construction investigation requests, building permit applications, plan reviews, zoning search, and building inspections. They are your go-to source for determining what and where you are allowed to build and develop, and everything you'll need to know to do so. And I personally want to thank my colleagues. Economic development and buildings work very closely together, and there are times when we're working with our clients and make that phone call, and our buildings team is always very responsive and has that kind of a client and customer service mindset. And so we're very appreciative of all the collaboration we've done, and with this opportunity to share information this morning with our businesses. So in this webinar, our Building Standards Department will outline how the available tools and required processes assist in locating your business while maintaining compliance with the building code, zoning bylaws, and other applicable legislation to protect the interests of both individuals and the community as a whole. As I said earlier, we have two of our professional staff today. Kristen Miller is the supervisor of zoning for the Building Standard Department. Kristen has been with the City of Markham for 8 years and is responsible for interpreting and applying the city's zoning and sign bylaws in the processing of building permits and planning applications. And Daniel Papaconstantino has 19 years experience in the building, planning, and construction industry. Currently, Daniel is a supervisor of permit administration for the Building Standards Department. And Daniel is your point of contact for questions related to the building approval process and can act as a liaison to guide clients to the appropriate staff. So with that, I'd like to welcome my colleagues. Sheila, you're here as well as manager, and appreciate your support. I know you'll kind of be in the background, but looking forward to hearing from your team this morning. If I can also just ask everyone to keep their mics off and keep them on mute so that we have full sort of focus on the presenters this morning. Over to you.
Great, thank you, Christina. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us and for spending time today. We're very excited, as was noted, to present this information and to really just close the gaps and bridge that information into the community. It's going to be a great session. So I'm going to start this morning by talking about zoning designations and bylaws and some of the tools available on our website or to the public to find that information. Also going to bring you through various ways you can access information in our city, compliance reports, access to violations and notices, access to permit drawings, that sort of thing, to assist you in, creating your application or in understanding what has been approved. And I'm also going to walk through the sign permit process and what's involved there before turning it over to my colleague Daniel to speak about the permitting process itself, development charges, and what comes after issuance. And that's our topics for today. So starting us off here with zoning information, it's important, as I'm sure you're all aware, to understand the zoning as it relates to your business. Without an understanding of the zoning, it's difficult to know where to locate your business. As mentioned here on the slide, the official plan sets out broadly where uses are permitted, where we're looking for residential, where we're looking for commercial, industrial, and the type of densities and other things that the city is hoping to achieve. And then under that, the zoning bylaw sets out the applicable law and the actual various permitted uses in detail, what can happen in a zone, and the size and the requirements for any buildings or lots being created within that zone, things like parking spaces or height of a building, that sort of thing. So the first step in most projects, and whether it be a new construction or new development or an alteration or just a tenant fit up and locating business, is to understand what the zoning permits and whether your use and your business is allowed to be there. And to that end, there are sort of two main ways that you can do that in Markham. The first is called a property details search. And this is an online tool. It's available for any property within the municipality. You don't need to be connected to the property. You don't need to be an owner or have any sorts of agreements. Anybody can make this request online at any time and free of charge. Through this tool, you can see some of the screenshots here. You'll be able to see in the map what the zoning designation is, which is that purple text that you're seeing on the left-hand side. And then you'll also be able to generate this report on the right-hand side, which gives you a great overview of what to expect for a property. And I often recommend that people start here. It will give you the address, information on the zoning bylaw and designation. What is the official plan? Designate the lands. And it also gives you a great resource in terms of your applicable law and what to expect there. So things like, are you in an area that requires site plan control? Are you in a conservation area that may require further approvals if you're building onto a building, building a new building, that sort of thing. So it lets you know what type of approvals to expect and generally what the zoning for the property is. And then from here, you have a couple options. Sorry, if you can just go back one slide, Sheila. So if you are in our bylaw 17796, and you can see it there listed under the zoning bylaw number, this bylaw is available to the public online and is the majority of, at this point, most parcels in the city are getting to be in this bylaw. So this is available to anyone online. You can search this bylaw and find full information, self-serve for yourself. If you do not find that you are in bylaw 17796, if it lists another bylaw there, that's when you might have to go a step further and involve us at the city. So on the next slide, the other way you can go about finding information for zoning is through our zoning search process. It's available for any property within the city, whether you're in that bylaw, regardless of what bylaw you're in. And there is a $50 fee. It's submit online through our website portal, and you can see the link at the bottom of the slide there. And the timeline for completion is 10 days. So within that time period, you will receive information back in a report that explains the permitted uses, the development standards for the property. It will provide to you excerpts from the zoning mapping, and it will provide confirmation if requested on whether a use is permitted. And this one is very important because you may require it for other processes as well. We'll talk about it a bit later, but you can use this for your business license, or if you need to prove use for other reasons, for financing or otherwise. This is often used for letters to the Ministry for Education purposes or other reasons to just confirm that your use is permitted on site, and is also a great step before proceeding to confirm an offer for lease or for purchase of a property. You can ask us about your business. There's a free form field, and provide as much detail as possible, and we will respond and confirm in writing whether the use is permitted or not, and any restrictions that may exist on the use. And highlight those with excerpts from the bylaw. So this is a really great service for a minimal fee, a nominal fee, to get confirmation and a peace of mind before proceeding into the next steps. One of those items, and this is a nice segue into it, is parking. So we will often confirm through a zoning search that your use is permitted. And one of the items that it might be permitted subject to is parking compliance. So all uses within our city are subject to compliance with our parking bylaw, and are only permitted to be there and to actually open up and operate. We could only issue a building permit if you have that compliance. So in particular, I would recommend, if you are looking to locate specific types of businesses, you pay particular attention to the parking requirements. Businesses such as restaurants, banquet halls, bars, and nightclubs have a higher rate of required parking than other commercial uses that may exist on the site, as well as items that are parked based on design. So those are places of worship, childcare centers, school uses, similar uses like that, that are parked on the basis of the number of classrooms or the number of students. So often through our zoning process, you may ask about these uses, and we may say that they are permitted subject to parking compliance with our bylaw 2897. So this bylaw is available to anybody online. You can see the source again there at the bottom for it, but if you type it into Google or you go through our website, there's many ways to get there. And it has all of the requirements for the uses within our municipality and what would be the required rate. There are also some parts of this bylaw that you can use to reduce your rate. There's a shared parking table, if applicable, to your business type. And there's a rate for shopping centers that I would, look towards. So, but those are the two components generally from zoning end that we are looking for any tenant fit up, any alteration where you're going into an existing space. Is your business permitted to be there? Is the use allowed on site? And if so, do you have adequate parking available for that use? So those are the two main drivers, I would say, before looking to locate your business from the zoning end. Ask about use, ask about parking, and confirm those two elements and see what staff have to say. The next thing I wanted to chat about this morning is access to information. One of the things that can really help when you're searching for a location or a business is having an understanding of what has occurred on the property over time, what businesses have been permitted there, and what violations, if any, or other approvals may exist for the property. This tool, again, is available off of our website on the Markham building page. And it's available 24/7 to anybody. There's no charge to put this, to put forward a public search. You can request for any property. You can search by map or by address. And what it will do is generate a listing like you see on the right-hand side through this image here. And it will indicate to you any permit numbers. You can see off the top, the first section is permits. If there have been permit records, alterations or new builds, anything like that, it will give you a basic summary. When, what was it for, and what's the status of it? Has it been issued? Is it still under review, etc. It will also indicate development reviews, which is the next column or next row down rather. So things like minor variance applications or planning applications in general to permit zoning amendment or site plan approval, that type of thing will be shown here. And why that might be of interest to you, particularly in locating a business, is that, you know, for example, a minor variance would show potentially a new use that is permitted on site, or a confirmation of use, or it may show that there's been some changes to the parking or some other development standards over time. That may be good information to have going forward, particularly parking. If you know there's been reductions there, that may impact, you know, your own business use if you're trying for something that has a further parking implication. And then finally there, you'll see also business licenses and that sort of information. So you can see what type of businesses have been licensed to operate on site. Are they similar to the business that you're proposing? And that may help you in trying to find a site that has, you know, a similar set of permissions, or to see what has, you know, what has occurred historically over time and what you're perhaps buying into. Further to that, we also have what's called a compliance report. This is also available for submission online off our building permit page. There is a $200 fee, and it's often done before a client purchases a property to find out the full details. Information available includes items like the legal description, any building code or violations, work orders against the property, outstanding or issued building permit records. We also provide basic zoning information, the designation and bylaw number. If you provide to us a survey as part of this process, we will also confirm whether the building is in compliance. So often for residential properties, or if persons are purchasing full industrial or commercial, it's a great way to confirm that the building that you are purchasing is cited correctly on the lot and that there are no violations there. So all of that can be done through a compliance report, and that process is available online as well for you. And the final sort of information process or access to information process that I wanted to chat about this morning is our access to permit drawings. So if you have the owner's authorization, or if you are the owner yourself, you can come to us directly through the building department and ask for access to permit records that have been issued, including site plans, floor plans, mechanical, whatever is available, whatever you request. We will look through our records and go through and check for that. So this is very helpful if you're putting together new applications for building permit. You may find it's beneficial to obtain these records to see what's been previously approved, or it may help a designer in the preparation of the drawings, or just for your own information to see what has been previously approved. But as long as you are the owner or have their authorization, you can come through this process. And for a minimum fee of $60, we will check our records and produce information that is requested. We produce those records in a digital copy, soft copy that's emailed out, or if the files are too large, there are other methods for Dropbox or otherwise. But so that process is a great way to see what has been approved on site. And like I said, get a copy of those permit records in the event you want to have something to start from in the preparation of your own drawings. If you do not have the owner's permission, or if you are not the owner, there is you can still obtain this information, but you would have to go through a Freedom of Information request through our clerk's department. And finally today, I wanted to talk about sign permits, as this is a sort of often overlooked aspect of tenant fit up. So regardless of whether you are looking to do construction in the building, or whether you are changing use and requiring a building permit, most businesses would like exterior signage to promote themselves for the community. So if you are looking to install signage on the building or on the lot, whether it be a ground sign, pylon type sign, or whether it be, a wall sign affixed to the building, any type of permanent signage like that is regulated through our bylaw 2002-94. It's known as the sign bylaw, and it's available online through our website. You can also Google search that number, and it will come up for you as well. So if you are looking to install signage, you require a permit prior to doing so, unless you are one of a very few set of exceptions that are listed in that bylaw in section 4.6. But most all signage on the exterior of the building, permanent signage, will require a permit. And you can submit one through our e-plan system, which Daniel's going to talk about further in our next set of slides. But just keep that in mind before your sign company installs, before you put up signage associated with a business or move forward with that, your clients or yourself should be aware that they will need that approval in place. And if they are looking to install any portable, mobile, or banner signs, which often come at the time of a new grand opening or A-frame signs in front of the building, that sort of thing. Those are not done through us, through the permitting group, but through our licensing department. And you can get approvals through them by giving them a call or seeking further approval. They have an email that we'll share at the end of the presentation. So that brings me to the end of my component, and I'm going to turn it over to Daniel to go in detail about how you would apply for those permits and when you're going to need those permits.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Good morning, everybody. As Christina mentioned, I'm the Supervisor of Permit Administration within Building Standards. As you can see from what Kristen delivered just previously, there's a lot of services that we offer that allow you to obtain information, and it allows you to make some qualified decisions as you move forward with your tenant fit ups or business location. And I think it's really important that you take advantage of that. The next part of the presentation that I'm going to deliver really talks about the operation of you getting into that. Once you've made the decision that you're going to go forth with your business in a particular location, or you've done some due diligence, and it gets to the point of what approvals do I need from building standards at that particular time. The first question being, do I need a building permit? And the question is, a lot of the times, yes, you will require a building permit for your tenant fit ups. It just determines on to what extent that you are actually going to be doing alterations. If you can see by the first bullet here on the slide that in some cases a permit won't be required if it is something minor, very minor in nature, like replacing a plumbing fixture that already exists there. But what is important to realize is that if you were to move that plumbing to a different location or introduce new plumbing in a new location, you would require a permit. So the takeaway from this really is, when we ask the question to ourselves, do I need a building permit, is number one, yes, you can do your due diligence, but we would always ask that please reach out to us. We have a number of staff and contact points that you can reach out to find out if you want to have a quick conversation, to give us a brief synopsis of what you're doing. And we can make the determination fairly quickly with a simple phone call or even an email, whether a building permit would be required. In regards to the second bullet on this slide, the first statement I made was a lot of the times you are going to require a building permit as part of your tenant fit up. And in most cases, the easiest thing to take away is that, when you're changing an occupancy, and when I say occupancy, I mean use in lighter terms, from one use to another, a lot of the time you are going to require a building permit for that alteration or that change of use. And sometimes it's because you're going to a greater hazard, or what we identify as a greater hazard within that building or structure than what existed previously. A good example being a warehouse converted to a banquet hall. There's a number of life safety considerations that have to be made along that approval process when you make that application to us. And like I said at the onset of this, the best thing that you can do at any given time is to reach out to us to have that quick conversation. It could be via email, it could be a phone call. Um, what you'll find at the end of this presentation, we're going to provide you some very detailed contact information of staff that you can contact, mainly being myself, Kristen, and some of our general lines, which is really helpful for the industry, I think, because it gives you that point of contact. Because we understand that when you are going through this process, that time is of the essence for you, and we want to make that as quick and easy as process for you, where days are very important to you, especially when entering into lease agreements and so forth. So whenever there is a need and whenever you do have the question to find out, do I need a building permit, please reach out to us or use the resources that you have available through this presentation, which is, I don't think it totally serves the purpose of answering those questions. So please contact us and we'll get you the answers to the questions that you have. Moving on, in this particular slide, we're talking about what type of building permit do I need? And that's a question that we see a lot in terms of tenant fit ups, because there are instances where there's minor works taking place, which still require a building permit, or major works that are taking place, major renovations. Now, when we talk about alterations permits versus non-housing permits, it's pretty much a business process for us, but it's important for you to understand that these two different permit types are significant. In the alterations permit, you're doing somewhat of a minor interior alteration, whether you're moving partitions or changing a space to suit your particular business. That's something that we considered an alterations permit. The non-housing or NH permits, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail through when I explain the E-plan submissions, it's important to realize that this type of permit identification is really reserved for major occupancy classifications changing, major exterior modifications are being proposed. And one that we see a lot is the repurposing of space internally to create mezzanines, which in reality are somewhat of additions to floor areas. So we classify those as different permit types. And this is something that, can be understood through initial discussions when you contact us if you have questions. And that's something, some of the questions that we'll be able to answer for you when you do contact us or reach out. One of the great things that we offer at Markham is a detailed permit guide on our website. Now, at the bottom, you'll see a link to those guides that we provide. And what we do is we actually break down those different permit types that we offer for your different permit solutions and approval process. And if you were to go to that link, what you would find is a breakdown of all forms, plans, and documents that would be required for each permit type that you'd be looking at. In your particular case, you'd be focusing on alterations permits being ALs or non-housing permits being NHs. And in that guide, like I said, it will specify all the permit documents that you would need, our forms, and all of the drawings that we would need. Now, what I can emphasize on that is that a lot of the times that you're going to be working as a go-between. If you're not the applicant on a file, you may have a professional designer involved in the process of you obtaining this tenant fit out permit or this alterations permit. So there is a lot of information within those guides that stipulate which plans and drawings would be required. And it can be cumbersome to go through them all, but what we do say is that when you contact us, there's going to be a lot of times that we can water down what those requirements would be for you to provide us sometimes, if it is a minor alteration. So please, again, reach out to us as soon as possible, and we'll assist in every way we can to make that as seamless as possible for you. Who can apply? So this is what I was getting at in what I just spoke on the last permit. A lot of times what you're going to have is yourselves as tenants or owners of properties that are going to undertake this building permit approval process. And sometimes, you want to act as an applicant yourself, and you want to have designers, and you want to be the point of contact of what's going on. it's not a problem in any particular case. Anyone can serve as a permit applicant so long as they have the authorization of the owner. You being a tenant, you become the owner under the Ontario Building Code Act. But you can either have your designer act as an applicant, or you can have yourself to act as an applicant. What it means is that the permit applicant is going to be the primary contact for a permit application. That's our business solution that we use in the City of Markham. So when we have an applicant on a file, and if you choose that to be yourself, that you're going to be the primary contact for all correspondence that goes back and forth through the permit submission process and also the inspection process, which I'll talk about a bit later. And depending on the scope of the projects, in a lot of scenarios that you'd be dealing with, you will only need a qualified designer, what we identify as a BCIN designer, a licensed architect, a professional engineer, or combination of these. Sometimes what you'll have is you could have a situation where you have a BCIN designer that is qualified for that particular scope of building or alteration that you're doing. And then you could have a combination of a professional engineer involved that may be doing the mechanical design, which would be required if that designer was not qualified in that area and it was a scope of work that required the professional. So you could have a combination of individuals contributing to your alteration project or your non-housing NH project. The applicant who has submitted the permit application will be the individual who has access to all of our e-plan tasks and will be the sole person that we talk to. I think this is a good point. A lot of the times what we have is our permit applicants are the go-between between the owner and ourselves and building standards. And that works if you have a very diligent applicant or a very diligent designer that's undertaken that process for you. But what you have to realize, like we emphasize, the sole person will be that individual that is the applicant that deals with our e-plan submissions and all communications going back and forth. Now, what's important to realize is, you as an owner or an interested party within that particular application, it's not like we shut the door on you and say we don't want to speak to you, but our primary correspondence via email and the portal goes directly between us and the applicant. So that's something to keep in mind. And what we have below there is a link to that particular business solution that we have, but you can always reach out to myself and I can explain that in greater detail for you. My staff also have the ability to do so and answer those questions for you also. How do I apply? So at the City of Markham, particularly building standards, we have our city's e-plan system, which we have a 100% digital service. So all building or sign permit applications are accepted online through the city's e-plan system. What we do have are specific tutorials and videos that are in place to assist you with your submission. And on top of that, we have our technical support with ePlan that is available by contacting these particular contact points, whether it be the phone number or through an email. If you are going to be an applicant, I would highly suggest that you make yourself familiar with those contact points and also our available resources, what we're going to talk about now. So on our website, we have our ePlan Steps to Success, our online user guides. And what they do is they really provide an overview as a helpful resource for each step of the process that you go through. What we've done is we've laid it out in really step A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on for you to actually go through the ePlan steps to either register, submit an application, to upload, to review, approve, and inspect. And what we have for these is we have quick references guides that give you the information that you need to be successful in each one of those steps. This is something that you can take time as an applicant, if you are going to be the applicant, to go through and make yourself familiar with the process as you're going through it. And once again, just because we provide this information on a step-by-step basis doesn't prevent you from reaching out to us at any given time. In the previous slide where we had that contact information, those are good points of contact for you to reach out at any particular point in this process to say, I necessarily don't understand what I'm doing in this particular case. Could you please give me some assistance and we'll get back to you, or speak to you immediately if that's the case. And once again, we have our links at the bottom of this that you'll be able to refer to when it's made public. When will I get my permit? So this is one of the biggest questions, and a reoccurring question that we see when dealing with tenant fit ups or businesses that are trying to get up and running through the building a permit approval process. And we understand that time is of the essence. Every day counts for small businesses. In the instance that you most of the time have um, entered into a lease agreement, and sometimes are paying leasing fees and rental fees before the business is even up and running, and we understand that. So what we try to do is we try to reduce the time frames for these particular projects. So alterations permits have an expedited technical review time of 10 business days once your permit application has been accepted and the permit fees have been paid in full. So that's 10 business days. And let's say you make a building permit application and then we respond to you and say, these are some areas of deficiency or clarifications that you need to provide us so we can approve this project. What we do is we further expedite that by reducing the target review timeline of 5 days when it's recirculated to us or you make a resubmission to us. So it kind of assists you in that way in reducing the amount of time frames as much as possible. Missing information and non-compliance with submission standards will delay the process of your application. I think that's inevitable. If you have deficiencies, it's something that needs to be addressed. But from this timeline, that you can see that we're trying to expedite them in a technical way as much as possible. But it's important that you and your designers or your permit applicant, if it's a third party, has to understand that with every deficiency, there has to be a re-review that takes place. We do our best to look at those re-reviews, like I said, in an expedited manner, but any non-compliance issues really cost you time. So it's something that you really want to get your ducks in order and reach out to us if need be to understand what's going on at any particular time, and we can provide you some assistance. Once again, we have a resource for you at the bottom with a link about making a building permit application, which gives you that step-by-step and information guide along the way. So the next slide we're talking about here is development charges. And this is something that are sometimes overlooked by businesses when they are trying to establish a new business or a new building or an alteration to a building that is not minor in nature or is really changing the use sometimes. So development charges are fees that are collected by the city to help us pay for our roads and other services, our community centers, fire services, and so on and so on. Development charges can be required for non-residential development if it involves the following: constructing a new building, if you're constructing a new building, making an addition or alteration to an existing building, which increases the gross floor area. So in an instance that you are putting an addition on a building and that floor area gets bigger and it becomes an area where development charges are subject, this is something that would incur development charges. The last bullet point under if the development charges may be required is redeveloping a tenant space which results in a change of use under the development charge bylaw. So a good example of this would be, and I'll make it very generic, because these are one of the great questions that I think that you need to be asking at the forefront of any conversation you have with us when you reach out is this going to be something that results in a development charge fee for me for this project, is I'm changing from this use to this use. I'm going from this occupancy to a new occupancy. So that's one of the questions that you really want to reach out to us for at the very onset of your project or when you're considering opening up the business or entering into any lease agreements, please reach out to us at the earliest available point to you, and we'll be able to assist you and get you in contact with the right staff if it is a complicated job to make that determination for you. One of the biggest takeaways is that we can never issue a building permit um, if it's not in compliance with all applicable law, being development charges themselves. So anytime there is a development charge applicable to a particular project, those development charges and any building permit fees would have to be paid in full prior to the issuance of a permit. And we give a link and a little bit more information in regards to this that you can take a look at a later date. So this is one of the areas that we do get a lot of questions about, because it's, you are interested in running your business. That's your primary goal. And sometimes a development approval process can be onerous. So in this particular case, this slide is a reference to really what steps do I take? I have my permit. What's the next step? What's the next step? So at the point that we've issued a building permit, that's not the end game as far as building standards is concerned. Once you have the building permit, you're actually going to execute the work on site and do the construction. However, there are mandatory inspections that have to take place throughout that whole process. When we do issue a building permit, you'll receive one of our building permit cards and our building permit placards, and that information contained in there is when you have to call for inspections, and it establishes the mandatory inspections that you should be calling for. It also gives the contact information of how you actually make that inspection request, and allows you to get to the point where you can get a completion certificate that the permit is now closed. Other approvals that you may be undertaking after that process are stationary business licenses, liquor licenses, or any other type of approval that you may need for your particular business in that case, depending on what that business is. Now, building standards itself is not responsible for the administration of the business license that you may be obtaining, but what we try to do is let you know at the earliest particular point of who you may have to contact or what approval process that you should be undertaking to obtain that business license. And that's something that we can always assist on if you want to, even at the forefront of a permit application or before you've made a permit application. Once again, we provide a link at the bottom of our at the bottom of this slide that'll allow you to contact with our bylaws and enforcement section that actually deal with licensing. So one of the biggest takeaways that I talked about at the beginning of my speaking is that I think the contact details are going to be the most important thing that you can take away. And on these next two slides, you can see that what we've provided is really clear, defined contacts for what you're dealing with. Kristen spoke a lot about zoning compliance and any other service requests that you may have in regards to obtaining permit plans. So what we've done here is we've kind of broken it down into those major areas and provided specific contacts for you to reach out when you have questions pertaining to those particular areas. We have our zoning compliance, building permit administration, which you can always reach out to for general questions, regardless what they are, and we'll be able to assist you in providing those answers. We have our building inspections contacts. You're able to book an inspection online at any particular time once a permit is issued, when it's required. And a registered account is not required to make this request, because a lot of times your general contractors, whoever's doing the work, is going to make those inspections requests. So please, you can make yourself familiar with the contacts and links that we've provided before. Stationary business license and our building standards online services, we provided contact emails for that, and a contact and a link to our building standards online services. And the biggest takeaway is here is your contact details for myself, Kristen, Sheila, and our supervisor of plans review, Imran. At any given time, if you have any questions regarding the permit approval process or an instance of zoning, please utilize these contacts that we have. You have our email there and our phone number, and any particular time, please reach out to us and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. We understand that time is always of the essence for small businesses, and we'll make as much effort as we can to make that as painless and as quick as possible for you.
Thanks, Daniel and Kristen. It was a great presentation, very thorough, and having clear points of contact for our clients, I think, will be very useful. I know that you provided an overview of information that's available, both self-guided and free of charge. So I think there's a lot already online that anyone interested in knowing more can pursue on their own. And there's also more customized searches that are available for a fee. So I think when doing due diligence, that's a great tool and ability to have available for clients. And then Daniel, very thorough covering of what, when you need a permit, how you go about approaching the city. One of the, maybe what I can do is just open the chat up and invite anyone with questions to please either raise your hand or place your questions in the chat. And maybe just to get the questions going, I can ask about situations maybe that we had recently where there was a client and the small addition the client was making to their business premises was adjacent to a natural area. And so it triggered some further circulation of the building permit application to external agencies. And in this case, it was a Toronto Region Conservation Authority. And I just want to raise that and to kind of also tell the clients around the table here today that some of their expansions or some of their building permits may kind of trigger some external circulations and what that might mean for their timelines as well. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I'd say anytime there's an addition beyond the building envelope, so you're adding on to the building. One of the first items Kristen brought up was our property detail search. And the Conservation Authority is one of the items that you can quickly check to see if that property is in a conservation area, because it is an applicable law under the building code. So the Building Code Act does not allow us to issue a permit unless you've already obtained your approval from the Conservation Authority. And one of the difficulties that can happen is they have their own set of criteria that may impact your building design. So if you apply to us first, we could do our review, but be sitting there waiting for the other approval to come through. And when that happens, if your design has changed to meet their requirements, now you're back having to revise your building permit drawings, because of course they need to be consistent and coordinated. So just to reiterate from Kristen's presentation, it's really important to know at the outset what other applicable laws may impact your project so that you can get those approvals going while the rest of the project is under review and whatnot. So
great, thank you, Sheila. Heather Sally Design has a question. Heather, did you want to speak to that question, or you want to include that in the chat? And Josh, if I can ask you to perhaps unmute if Sally would like to speak to her question.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yep.
Okay, sure, I'll talk.
Great.
So thank you for the presentation. It was great, very informative, and lots of resources where we can go and obtain our own information, which is great. So thank you very much to everybody. So what I'm wondering is, so I'm a designer, and I've just started to work with some small businesses and their real estate agents to bring them into spaces where I can show them potentially how they can use their space and whatnot. So let's say we go into a space that was previously a chiropractic office, and we want to make some changes that we would like to make a permit application for. Let's say the previous tenant has made some additional changes that they did not apply for a permit for. So let's say they installed a washroom themselves and didn't apply for a permit. How does that then, because that obviously then becomes integrated into our drawings and anything that we're submitting for a permit application. So how does that then affect the process moving?
So if there's anything on the drawings that does not have a previously approved permit, then
Right.
from our perspective, it's new construction.
Absolutely.
Now you're forced to go and get a permit for that work after the fact, right? Which is frustrating for everyone
Right.
involved.
Yep.
In particular, if it was done and it didn't meet code requirements. If
Oh,
it's a
I can't
washroom,
even
right?
tell you
Yeah.
how many times we walk into places that have had shoddy renovations that are definitely not up to code. so that's why, and we have, I haven't encountered this in terms of an application for myself or any of the businesses that we've worked with, but because I have seen it, I just am, and let's say we apply for that permit, we being, let's say my client who is the lease agreement holder.
Mhm.
What happens to the property? Like, do the property management company or the building owners are they on the hook for that? Or is it the actual tenant, the tenant who's on the leasing agreement?
So under the Building Code Act, it's the property owner who's ultimately responsible.
Yes.
Right? But it all comes down to what the agreements are between the tenant and the landlord and their own agreements, if you will. So we would not get involved in saying who's responsible for it, but we wouldn't be able to issue a permit until it's addressed.
Okay.
So, we've seen scenarios where the tenant just wraps it into their permit, or where the landlord comes out and gets a separate permit that has to get issued before we can issue the tenant's permit.
So what you'll find in a lot of those scenarios, like Sheila said, in your lease agreements or whatever agreement you have in place, a lot of the times you'll see return to base conditions within the agreement, which identify, a tenant enters and then a tenant when they leave return to base building. So that's something that as, a tenant or a designer that you're dealing with a prospective tenant is that you want to make them aware of within that agreement if it's being returned to base upon the conclusion of the agreement, right?
No, that's great. Like I said, we have come across a couple of properties where we have seen some questionable renovations that were implemented by previous tenants. So, that's just, like I said, from a town perspective or city perspective, I was just wondering, where you guys stood on that, and just to make sure that we keep our process streamlined, because that could be something that then, when I'm working with my clients, that they then instruct their real estate agent to do a little bit more due diligence in terms of leasing, negotiations and things like that.
For sure. And to go back to some of the online services Kristen highlighted, if a
Absolutely.
permit was obtained within the last 7 years, it will show up in that public search. So if you're assisting your clients in looking at a potential space and it looks like there's been recent construction, you can do a quick check and see what was this done under permit. And you'll see also they may have had a permit, but if the status is issued, that means we've never signed off on the inspections. So it's still an active permit.
Perfect.
Which, right? So that can have its own problems. So perhaps
Absolutely.
you don't want to sign the agreement until that's closed or whatever. But
yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what I said. It's a new branch of my business that I've just started working with. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the residential, but not so much with the commercial and business. So thank you very much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Great question, Heather. Any other questions? I know that there are some who kind of are having connection issues, but if there are any other questions, please use the chat. We'll kind of keep this going for the next few minutes, waiting for any further questions. And if there aren't any, again, you have a list of the contacts been provided at the presentation. That presentation will be circulated via email as a PDF attachment. And so you'll be able to pick up the phone or email directly to the subject matter experts. We will also share the link to this webinar so you can view it again if you like, if you wanted to review some of the information provided. I see a question from Selva.
It is not a question, it's just to say thank you to everyone. It's a nice presentation. That's what I congratulate you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Okay. All right. Well, it looks like there aren't any further questions. I just want to thank my colleagues again for sharing this great information this morning. I think, you know, we may have another opportunity to do another webinar at a later date. I think this has been a great opportunity to share a lot of just up-to-date information on the process for clients. Thanks, Joshua, for coordinating the webinar this morning. And thank you all for joining. We appreciate it very much. Again, you have our contact information. Presentations will be shared. You know, in economic development, we're here to help companies of all sizes, small entrepreneurs to large enterprises, and they often have to make some modifications to their businesses, either when they first start out or as they're expanding. And so we're very pleased to be working with you to facilitate business in the City of Markham. Thanks for your investment. And again, we'll circulate this information, and please reach out to us if you require further information. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.